Hello, fellow human on the internet. This video is about nothing that concerns anybody. It's just very personal, me venting out something I like to share, which is going to be a super overshare, but I have like 12 not disciples, subscribers. Actually, I think it's 14 now, but who cares? Even if nobody ever sees it, I don't care. It's just what I wanted to talk about today, and maybe somehow it normalizes what I'm about to talk about because I think a lot of people just react with utter amazement in sort of a negative way when I admit to them, I'm about 42 years old and I've never been in love. I've never fallen in love, really. It just hasn't happened. And they're like, you sociopath? Psychopath? I mean, what's wrong with you? They'll assume I'm perhaps traumatized, born with some kind of birth defect, or something must be wrong. Why, how could you? To me, it reads, how could you not be dumb enough to? Okay, not making any assumptions here, but honestly, I really think falling in love with a man has a certain prerequisite, which kind of being slightly on the dumber side, younger and inexperienced. Just, I don't think I was ever dumb enough to not see through the BS that is necessary to catch feelings. I feel like I have a brain that is like an analog camera that has a what I call a future lens through which you can get a crystal clear picture of what the future would look like. I see myself with somebody. And nothing can deter a present moment mistake from occurring like a crisp vision of the future. Yeah, upon the first glimpse, I'll take an x-ray of his struggling soul, his unwillingness to grow, and I will detect every subtle and or blunt lie to enlarge the looks of everything the guy has that comes in a size smaller than he claims. Call it lady intuition, but just don't call it, oh, you're projecting your negativity and sabotaging a possibly good thing, or you just have impossible standards, or you're a sociopath. Every time I made a mistake with a man, I did it knowingly. My lady intuition is just always full on correct. I knew the game, I knew the motive. I just always knew men would be a liability. Not that I've ever really seen one be an asset to a woman. I grew up seeing most women sacrificing their all to stay in relationships where they didn't even respect the man. I've always known it could only be a woman's inherent lack of self-worth that allowed them to fall prey to these wildly, at best insufficient, at worst dangerous men. Sure, I too have made mistakes, but they all involve the acknowledgement of it being a mistake. So it was never a mistake in hindsight, a clear garbage truck heading my way in foresight, rather. It's like when you take another shot of alcohol, knowing how much you're going to suffer the next day with the hangover. It's like your willful choice to suffer. I was able to say no to that drink more than most women around me could. And it wasn't as hard for me to say no because the way my brain functions, even if I liked a guy initially, all he had to do was to open his mouth for me to lose respect within a matter of minutes. You know how there's zero doubt when you meet a dog as to whether the dog likes you? Kind of like that. I usually have zero doubt when I meet someone and I know they don't like me, and I know that nobody really has loved me in my life like that. And the couple who did seem to had pretty much everything to do with the possibility of schmegs, obviously. And I've always been fully aware that they never loved the human being of me and never bothered to look deeply into my soul to study what makes me unique, to acquire the knowledge of what makes me happy or what makes me sad or mad. A woman who is average and decent looking, halfway decent like me, there are plenty of guys who like a part of you, typically a body part, or the feeling that they get from you as a source of that feeling, which is anything that makes them feel manly, powerful, or needed. Stripped of all that, I haven't witnessed a man loving a woman like one loves a flower for just existing, or the values you represent, or the wisdom you hold, regardless of your age or your looks, namely anything outside the context of what benefits him. You may indeed never love her the way a woman can admire a man for his character, even if she'll never meet him. I've been able to admire men like that easy. The true objective of a man's love and desire seems to be the image of themselves in a woman's so called mirror. And this has just never been sufficient enough to settle for as a self respecting woman. I just needed more. So, in all these tests of courage, honesty, integrity, intelligence, and open heartedness, for the mere promise of schmegs from an average looking middle aged woman, they weren't too excited either, you know? A spiritually evolved person's actions aren't dictated by ego, the kind of person with that set in motion gene, the self starter, the responsible, the generous heart, and who's aware and in control of his dark side and would never dare let it spill out to hurt others. And on top of that, chooses to love the essence of me so I can feel fully safe and confident in that relationship. There's zero competitors in that sport. All the men I ever met, they want me laughing at their jokes, okay? While my good jokes go unlaughed, my talent goes uncelebrated, while they want me celebrating their wins. My beautiful skin goes uncaressed, while they want to satisfy their own urges. The content of our conversations usually remain ankle deep when I want to swim in the deep ocean and explore, which is a process that would take several lifetimes to really get to know someone, right? Forget about acknowledging my intellectual competence or learning from my unique ideas. You know, I'm too opinionated, so total turn off. Forget intimacy. Forget being concerned with my experience, aside from what my unhappiness would say with them, would say about them. Obviously, that would be a concern for them. Sort of like a friend I knew whose husband was the biggest jerk and didn't love his wife at all, but cared about her feedback in bed, only to feel accomplished about his ability to make her, you know. And no, that's not an expression of love and care. The ones I met, they never came to give, they came to take. And because they didn't love me, they were always stingy. They lacked the wisdom of nature, where it's clear that a feminine element thrives, receives, flourishes, and multiplies wonderful things only when the masculine element takes the initiative to give, nurture, and protect. These guys didn't give me anything to make me want to open my heart to them in. Especially later in life, it became crystal clear that without investment of time, energy, and money, a man will value nothing. The fact that materially I've always been a minimalist who's happy with the bare minimum did not make me dumb enough to see that generosity is the marker of a good heart. Their lack of interest in me was readily met by my indifference towards their banal existence and lack of effort to prove themselves respect worthy. There was no denying the mismatch between their words and actions. There's no pill to help me digest the fact that they'll lie without batting an eye if it promised them pleasure or some social status gain. It's funny because I have a deep yearning to feel that respect, to look up to a guy and say, I'm honored to know you, sir. But I may very well never see the day. Who knows? Maybe I'm cursed. Maybe men are just too rare with such low statistical odds. And all I've ever known were immature boys in adult bodies, and that's maybe just the norm. The other day, a very good looking 23-year-old came over to hit on me, thinking I'm I too am in my 20s, maybe late 20s. He tried so hard to get me to go to his room while the whole time I was talking to him because he had a gorgeous dog with him. And so I gave him a bunch of big sister advice he'll never take, and I sent him off. So this is literally the summary of interactions with men, regardless of their chronological age. It doesn't get much better when they're older. I've always been able to foresee that they're coming to extract from me, and none of them saw me, none of them heard me, none of them cared for what I felt or what I thought, and my honesty was never welcomed. This is the most important part. You know, it was always met with a complete shutdown or abandonment and full on defensiveness. None of them would care to fix an issue to keep me in their lives. I just don't have the personality that caters, bends, and warps and agrees to sacrifice for things that aren't worth it. Knowing full well if they were worth it, I would actually gladly make certain sacrifices. But for a man who doesn't love me, no, not bending over backwards. And even more disappointing were the nice men who are mere cowards and puppets to other more powerful men. Really, when you look into their behavior, the ones who don't stand up for what's right because they subconsciously know they're too weak. And this is like literally, I think 98% of men, at least the ones I've known. How sad is it, right? They don't directly do you harm, but these types are the ultimate enablers of other horrible men. Like anyone who works for or supports a politician or an establishment that is a toxic person to society and the environment and their actions. The men who work for the money, completely dissociated from the ethical aspects of what their labor is contributing to. That's what I'm talking about. They're the ones who never take responsibility to warn or actively try to change anything these other horrible men do. They won't protect you when you need them. They're spineless and they cannot be trusted. So it is therefore impossible to be attracted to these men as a healthy woman. And since they're the majority, so I wish I could tell you I've experienced deep love and respect for another male being. I will say that I consider myself lucky that I've never seen this as a big loss. If anything, I see this as a God's protection. Nature is still fair to us ladies, though, in my opinion, because our lesser reliance or need for them makes up for the sadness that comes with the shortage of eligible good men, especially as we get older. The world would truly be hell, I think, if we actually needed them as much as they need us. So, any guy out there who got this far listening to me, please just be a good friend, brother, cousin, neighbor, colleague, any of those. And that whole lover and life partner deal, most of us have long given up already. But you can still be cared for as a fellow human in the eyes of the average lady. If you just learn to see her worth as a fellow human separate from her sexual value. And that's all I got to say about this topic that nobody gives a shit about. And it's just too personal. Okay, thanks for listening anyway. Bye bye.